Hello, welcome to the Boss It podcast with Mark Edwards and Michael Humblett. This podcast is released every week and is an over-the-shoulder look of a frank and candid discussion between two experienced software executives, providing you with useful tips, techniques and the latest concepts to help you grow your software business in the fast-paced digital age. So let's get into it. Here is Mark Edwards and Michael Humblett.
Hello, this is the Boss It podcast, and today we've got another interview opportunity, and we're going to be talking to James White. James I've known for a number of years, and has got an interesting history within the software sector. He's also written a book, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and we will create the link for that. So welcome, James.
Thanks, Mark. Great to be on the podcast. Really
excellent. I thought to start off, give us a little bit of background about yourself. Where did you start from? What were the key moments in your life, and how did you get into the software sector? I mean, was that always a goal? I guess not. When you were at school, I doubt if you said, I want to get into the software sector.
No, it's a great point actually. So very quick history. I left university and joined a computer networking company actually called 3Com, which was sort of my entry into technology itself. And that was in the sort of late 90s, and I spent sort of 7 years with those guys, and about 2 years with another organisation, rising up to sort of senior roles, and enjoyed the technology space in itself and what it was about. I always felt that technology was having a big impact on people and what it could do. But I was in I joined 3Com and then joined a company called Allied Teleson. And I was working at Allied, and we were using some software platforms at the time to engage with partners and do a number of things. And I remember thinking at the time, this software is really, really neat, actually, and it's quite clever. And why isn't there something that works like this for small businesses? So long and short, I approached the person that was the owner of the software company and said, I really think there's an opportunity to take what you're doing here into lots of small businesses. Would you be, can I, is there a way of partnering up to do this? And he said, no, I'm not interested in doing that. So I thought, well, let's go and build my own software. And that sort of started In Touch, and that was like 14 years ago. So, yeah, very interesting. That sort of very brief history is how I got to sort of where I was.
What was the industry like when you were at 3Com, when you first came into the software sector? What do you see, and what are the changes that you've seen from sort of back in those days to perhaps now?
Yeah, 3Com had a mixture of products. They had, they obviously had hardware. They were known for switches and desktop sort of products, but they also had a number of sort of software products themselves that were also being deployed at the time. And if you remember, software back then was they had network management software and remote. And I remember always being intrigued actually, because the hardware, the physical stuff was always very it's a box, it's a tin, it's there. It doesn't really do much. But actually software, we used to have this remote management software that used to identify for network managers all the computers that used to sit on their network, and actually they could manage them. And I remember used to look at it and think, been sort of quite intrigued by how clever this bit of software was to be able to do, to provide this information. So I guess the thing for me was, and at the time, 3Com gave that software away actually with some of their products. So they sort of saw the software as a sort of like a bit of freebie for the product. And actually, in time, you look at it now, the software itself becomes pretty key to many things. So what was amazing to me at the time was how useful the software was and the reaction it got from people, and I always thought that was a really a key thing I've learned in my career. The elements of software and the impact it has quite quickly is a big factor in getting people to really know whether the software that they use really sticks with them and works, or whether they sort of get to look at it but then don't stay with it. And I think that's one of the key things that stuck with me. The network management software we had was clever and engaged people quite quickly, and it sort of made them then build momentum from there.
Yeah, I think I had a similar experience in working for, a number of predominantly hardware manufacturers and distributors. And I think what they were seeing was in the 90s that margins were reducing because there was much more competition, and they were essentially selling something that was very similar. The black box that did something pretty similar to the other bit of black box, and they were starting to differentiate themselves by the sort of the add-on software. And some of those companies went on to be more software vendors in the end. They sort of went through that evolution process. So what was it that Allied were doing?
So Allied were basically a component. I say component. They used to do a lot of again what I would call media connectors, switches. It was sort of in networking that they were involved in. But if I'm honest, my time at Allied was great fun. I met some great people who I enjoyed working with, but I took on a role that, without going into the details, the politics of that company were very strange and very difficult in many respects. And what they did, it was a privately owned company by a Japanese, very wealthy Japanese guy who then had some Italian people that ran the business in Europe. And
Right.
long story short, it was one of those times in my career when I thought, actually, this isn't. I was taking on an international sales and marketing director role to take on and do and make some things happen. And they were trying to move into a different space, and so we were trying to do some stuff in that area. But yeah, it was one of those times when when you work for people sometimes and you think some people can actually see the element of where they're trying to go and vision and back that with what they're going to do. And to the idea of the 3Com, people saw that actually exactly right. There was need to distinguish and just differentiate themselves. I'm not sure that quite came across in the same way Allied. So when the opportunity came to go and do something different, and I was at that stage at a time in my life where I'd had a slight, long story short, I'd got married and then divorced. So I was in the stage to think, right, well, I want to do something different, and hence
Yes.
why my own software company was the ideal moment for that.
I think one of the sort of the reoccurring themes when I'm talking to people in this sector is that they're going through those difficult times, which everybody has. I think when you're working really hard and you're in a difficult situation, you have to try different things. And the nature of that means that actually you probably learn a lot. Is if you've got that clear vision and everything's going smoothly, you're going to keep going and you're going to keep doing it. When things aren't working, you have to continually be reappraising and trying other things. And that experimentation means that it helps you. It doesn't necessarily feel like that it's helping you at the time, because it can be very, very difficult. I had exactly the same situation. I joined a company Uniplex, which was very well known, and they really struggled in going from software that worked on the old sort of dumb screen terminals, and Windows was coming in very, very strongly, and they just didn't seem to be able to adapt. They were known for a certain type of software, and their branding and the way that they were going about it was really struggling. But we were trying lots of things. I mean, held back by the ownership at that time, because it was bought by some American organization.
Yeah,
And I didn't really have that in-depth knowledge. But I must admit, I did learn a lot. And
yeah.
that's when I started, really got into the document management sector. So what did you do after Allied then?
So after I set up In Touch. So that was the appointment. So two things really that were key for me there. I guess the first thing was creating a software platform from scratch, which was interesting. And I learned some bloody amazing things from that, but also made some incredible amounts of mistakes, which I'm sure
Yes.
things that I got wrong that just when I look back now is the elements of it. But the other thing which was really interesting for me was why I'm a big believer in coaching and mentoring and supporting people. So I at the time was, as I say, I was on a 6-figure salary at Allied, but I'd just split up from my first wife. I was sort of like the single man, sort of late 20s, earning good money. But I just felt unhappy. So it was really weird. We're going through this process where money, I had plenty of money and doing what I want. And I remember talking to a coach, a lady called Jilly, actually, who was a friend of a friend. And, she sort of, and at the time I was a little bit skeptical of coaching, but she sort of said to me, well, let's just have a chat, let's have a coffee. And I remember her literally sort of saying to me, why do you feel this way? Why are you doing what you're doing? Why don't you, what stops you from building your own software? And this is when I'd sort of just been turned down by the company that I wanted to partner with.
Yes.
And it was really interesting. It was just the element of someone being able to look at your life in a fresh pair of eyes and look at and say, actually, you can do something here and go and make it happen. So the thing I always say to people is, I believe, it's why I enjoy being a mentor and coach now, because actually when you have the chance to engage with someone that then can look at you objectively and say, what stops you from doing it? You realise then actually you haven't got any excuses. So it's a real good chance for you to then go and do something different. And that's when I started In Touch and started to build my own software platform, basically.
Yeah, one of the quotes, I'm a great Winston Churchill fan. And one of the quotes that I remember from him is about success is going from failure to failure without any loss of your enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And I think that that is really key, because you do see people that they come up against obstacles, but it stops them. They lose that drive and they don't necessarily continue. So when you...
You're right. It's about mindset. No, you're right. It's about mindset.
Yes.
And ultimately, it's about there's two things I've learned in my career. The first one is in a want to continue to learn, and I continue to learn every day and believe I can open my mind to something. And the second thing is then a mindset that says I'm going to be successful. I'm going to achieve it. I may go through the bumps along the way, but actually, providing I learn and providing I take on board things, then I'm going to get there. And I think those two things I believe are amazing factors to have in any business person's life. If you can want to learn and you can put your mindset in the right direction, there's nothing that can stop you, but you've got to want those two things badly enough.
Yeah, and it's definitely one of the qualities that I'm always looking out for in people. And in fact, it was in our previous conversation when you were talking about some of this part of your history that made me think, actually, I think this would make an interesting podcast for Boss It, is because that there's going to be lots of other people out there listening to this that may be going through those difficult times at the moment or may have experienced that. And it is hard when, because you set a goal for yourself. A lot of the people that really get up and want to start their own business, to start an organization, you've got to have quite a bit of confidence and a lot of drive, and you tend to be sort of quite a goal-orientated person. And if you can't achieve that, then that does give you a bit of a knock.
It does, you're right. And the thing is, when you start something, especially in the software world, I mean, and I'm not a technical developer, so a lot of the software developers and software companies that get started are by people that that have got development skills, and I never had that. I had a vision of what I wanted, and I had a belief that it was the right thing to do, but I didn't have the technical skills to do it. So I had to then bring those skills in, and it was an interesting period for me. And that's again one of the sort of first parts I talked about mistakes that I made, which is that element of planning and also being able to really focus back on your customers' needs and drivers. And there was a great quote I was once told by someone about software, which is a really interesting thing, which is, is your software a vitamin or a painkiller?
Yes.
And the reality of that is, if you're a vitamin, then you're a nice to have. You're going to potentially face more of a challenge over time, where you've got to really make software intuitive enough to want to engage. And I guess the thing for me is, and that's one of my biggest failings, I think, at the start, is that I didn't do enough research. I knew there was a market opportunity there, but I probably didn't do enough research initially as to really what the customer problems were and actually what we were going to solve with those. And again, if we got there in the end, but it took a lot of time and wasted a lot of time initially. And I still encourage businesses that I engage with now to really focus on that element. What is it that you do for someone that makes their world a better place today? Because if you can't define that, you potentially got a bit of a challenge.
Yes, absolutely. I've heard that quote myself a number of times, and my take on that is that the difference between a vitamin and a painkiller is, with the vitamin, if you're going to a businessman, he will have many things coming at him, many things that he can do. A vitamin, as you said, is a nice to have, is probably going to fit lower down on his priorities than a real pain that is causing him. Something that's causing him pain, he'll be looking to solve that first. He may never get to the vitamin solution.
That's quite right.
Just, you don't have time. I mean, things move at such a pace. I mean, in the 90s, they were moving at a reasonable pace, but even now it's going so much faster with the internet, globalization, digital transformation. That's one of the key things that we're seeing, is the pace of business. And if you aren't able to articulate that pain and really understand your customers' needs, you're probably just going to be on the bottom of the to-do list that never gets done. I mean, we all have that, don't we? The sort of the to-do list that grows and grows, and in the end you just tear off the bottom part of it and say, I've got to focus on the most important things. You just don't have enough time in the day to do everything.
You don't, and you're right. And invariably, we all, we try, and again, one of the things about coaching, again, is it tries to focus on the things that are the proactive things to do. But you're right. You focus on the challenges that occur. And throughout my time when I was building In Touch and doing what we were doing, we used to look at different software systems that we used. And we used to say, is this integral to what we do? And without it, what would we do? Or is it just a nice to have? And actually, it goes back to that point I keep going back to. So if you've got a software system that is embedded in processes, that is linked into why people operate and what people do and how they do things, invariably, you become if you do things in the right way, that's the perfect software, certainly as a software as a service, because my business was software as a service and still is. The software platform does that now. You become entrenched into what people do. They will continue to pay for your service year after year, and I'd even go as far as saying you've got the opportunity to increase your prices potentially in time if what you do is so embedded in what they do. But if you're on the periphery of their world, then, as you say, and as a nice to have, then it becomes a big challenge, or bigger challenge, I should say, that you certainly need to address or be able to solve, as best you can.
So what was it when you first came up with the idea about InTouch? And actually, I remember when we first met, you were running InTouch, and I was quite interested by the business at that time, because I could see that you were doing quite a few other things, or the way you were presenting your software solution was quite different to many of the other. If we were to put you into the CRM sector.
Yeah.
When you first started, though, what was your goal? What were you aiming to create with InTouch?
So it's really interesting. So when I started it, I actually agreed. The company firstly was called Customers Really Matter, and it's an ironic thing because the name, people used to sort of link the two together. And the reason I started it was that I remember going to lots of small businesses and saying to them, you've got these customers, okay, you work really hard to get them, and we all know the model that, you make more money on the customer as it's with you over a period of time than at the start. And my message to them was actually, you've got these details here. Don't just, because what infuriates me a lot of the time, I hate people say, I've got a database of 5,000, 25, 50,000 people. Data on its own does nothing. It sits there. It sits in a spreadsheet or sits in a CRM system and does nothing. And also data is a journey, not a destination. So actually it's about what you do with those people on a regular basis. And I always break CRM down. When people say to me, what does CRM mean? It's I say to them, it's quite simple. It's your customers. It's your lifeblood of your business. It's your relationship with them and what you do with them on a regular basis to give them a great service and a great experience, and it's just how you manage that information. So do you agree with me? And I used to give examples to people of banks and doctors. If you went to a bank and they didn't know when you last took money out of the wall, then you wouldn't be with them very long, because you'd be thinking, well, these guys don't know me and who I am.
Yes.
So we used to sort of give analogies like that, but the key thing really was about actually how do I make this data do something for me, and add that to the fact that customers generally, when you've got them, you've then done the hard work. So what can you do to engage with them more effectively, to potentially get more wallet share from them, to get them to do more, but also to get them to become referrers and real supporters of you, and so that you can build more business as a result. So it stemmed from this idea of allowing small businesses, and I mean small, they were, people that were, and I'll come on to maybe that in a bit, that was one of my big mistakes probably of making it, small businesses is, people say, small businesses is my target market. That is not a target market. Small businesses is the generic term for 5 million people in the UK.
Yes.
So actually, but the idea was these guys were using bits of paper, and at the time even some were using Rolodex and whatever else to actually store the data. And we used to say, look, let's store it in a system that you can access, and by the way, then you can use tools to communicate and engage with those prospects and customers to actually do more business with them. So that was the goal and intention behind it.
Actually, I must admit, I like the idea of a bank that doesn't know when you're taking money out of the wall. I think they'd probably get quite a few customers for a while, wouldn't it, until they go bankrupt themselves.
Yeah, you're right. It would probably be a bad example. They would they do well for a while, but the point is, you wouldn't be very impressed if
you'd still not be impressed with their professionals. You would start to worry about the money you have got in there, wouldn't you? Really?
That's right. And we used to talk to small businesses, and we used to say to them, look, the way in which you engage with your clients. What do you do with this information? And it stemmed from it. Ironically enough, it stemmed from, I used to go to. So when I took some time off after I sort of left Allied, and I'd go to sort of like what the country shows and sort of like artisan food shows. Where you'd go there and it's big now, where you've got people selling sort of local farmers markets with cured meats or sausages or gins or wines or whatever.
Yes,
I used to go to these places and I used to buy from them, and I used to say to these people, I like your product. I really like what you do, and I think it's great. Why don't you take details of who I am? Why aren't you interested in then being able to sell to me? And I remember talking to this guy who made chutneys, ironically enough, and he had really professional labels. And he was like, that sounds like too much hassle. And I said, what? It sounds like too much hassle to get more money from people. And he was he was a bit, and probably one of the things that I learned at the time was that he was, a lot of what I did, and I found this out with software, and is about education. And a lot of what you do is about educating people that there is your software on its own won't do anything. It's how you educate people to use it to get best effect that I think is key. And that's probably another learning. It took me a long time to realize that the software itself is irrelevant. It's actually what people do with it and how they use it and the impact it can have that is the big difference and the reason people pay for it.
I like that. I like the sort of the mental image of you going around a food market challenging these people. Why don't you get yourself organised? Why don't you provide a proper customer service?
and that was exactly it. But it was ironic because I did, and I literally went to these people. I said, "I love what you do."
Yes.
And I used to say to them, and part of the biggest issue back then was they didn't even used to collect business cards or data. So and I remember telling people when it was around the same sort of time actually when. If you remember when Tesco launched Club Card, so sort of,
yes.
I have to look at the exact dates for it, but Tesco launched Club Card, and everyone was saying, "Oh, what are they doing? How are they doing?" And I said that they are only doing what any small business can do, which is to take the names and addresses of their customers, and by the way, find out what you're interested in and what you is your key requirements. What you like doing, etc. What's your favourite food or whatever, and actually just market back to them. So I said Tesco are doing it, so surely that's a good example for you to do it. But the challenge for a lot of small businesses is, and I still see it now, is that they know they should be doing things, but actually taking the time and the disciplines to do it is sometimes more of a challenge for them. So,
well, that was going to be my question actually, because you're saying about you targeted small businesses. Why did you target small businesses? What was your thinking at that time?
So my thinking at the time was, there were so many small businesses that I engaged with who didn't do what I felt they should be doing.
So you saw a need.
I saw a need, and there was a need, and at the time, funny enough, actually, I interviewed the guy that one of the guys that set up Salesforce in Europe, and who set that up in 2000, and I think it was 2000, and I set up In Touch in 2005. But I remember him talking to me about Salesforce and Salesforce being their cloud system. And he said, he remembers a guy called Phil Robinson, and he said to me when I spoke to him, he said, at the time we were selling religion as well as the Bible. Which I thought was a really good thing because the religion was in literally you need to invest in cloud-based software, and then he was selling Salesforce as a platform, and I that stuck with me actually afterwards. That at the time people were cloud was people were a bit suspicious about it. Software that you installed on your PC was safe, whereas something that was in this mystical cloud server sitting somewhere was something you should be a bit worried about. So but I felt lots of companies needed it, and I used to go, I sort of tested myself every time I walked out into a restaurant or into a shop or into anyone that did business with me. I asked myself the question, why aren't they doing what I need? What I'm suggesting here. And I used to, obviously being a salesman, I used to sell wherever I went and tell them, this is something they should look to do. So it made me think, and it made me think afterwards, this could apply to so many small businesses. Hence why we focused on lots and lots of small businesses. The challenge and probably the lesson I've since learned by that is that's okay to focus on lots of a wide market once you've built a position in one or two key markets. And I think the biggest problem is we probably could have picked, let's say if we'd have picked sports shops, I don't know, or restaurants or whatever else, and gone after and been the niche provider to that space and then built from there, that would have been okay. But we went out after everyone initially and probably wasted a lot of time and a lot of money by being too generic at the start.
Yeah, that's something that we see time and time again. I love that. I love that line. We had to sell religion as well as the Bible. Yeah, I've not heard that before. That's great, and I really understand that. That makes a lot of sense.
It does, and Phil was a good guy, a really nice guy to chat to about it. And it was interesting. It was at the same time that I met a guy called, around that time I'd met a guy called Dwayne Jackson. And Dwayne has recently sold Cashflow. He started an online accountancy product called Cashflow. And Dwayne's a lovely guy. I did a podcast with him a few years ago. Just, really inspirational guy for a lot of people. And he'd set up Cashflow. And, one of the things that if I look back at my business and Dwayne's business, because I haven't sold In Touch for what Dwayne sold Cashflow for, it goes back to that point around pain points as well and what businesses were having. So whereas I think he was the painkiller, whereas I think my business initially with In Touch was the vitamin at the time.
Yes. Have you had many people that you could look towards and think they were a mentor for me? Have you had that luxury of finding somebody?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when I started In Touch, I met up with a couple of people that I knew, and there's a chairman, a guy called David, who I met and been working with in 3Com and then Allied, and he was interested in sort of seeing what I was doing on the start of that journey. David came from a design agency perspective, so whilst he gave me some great advice from a business perspective, he didn't necessarily have any software. He hadn't got a software background advice. So I think.
But don't you think that can often be an advantage? Is when you bring in people from another industry and they see things with fresh ideas, and they also have ideas, concepts, methodology that perhaps isn't common within the industry in which you're in.
Definitely. There was huge amounts of things that David gave me in terms of knowledge and expertise and wisdom, and without him, I certainly wouldn't be where I was now. I think the one thing at the time, and it's interesting around niching, the first thing I think about planning and niching, but I think that. There were some things probably that in the software space that we probably could have got right more effectively if we'd have engaged maybe someone that had that experience. But when I want to go back to talk about someone like Dwayne, Dwayne, the other thing that Dwayne did really well, really early with Cashflow was built up raving fans. So I used to talk to him about this, and when Cashflow was at its early stages, there used to be people that proactively would go out of their way and tell other people how great that software platform was. And I always used to look slightly enviously at that, because I used to think, well, why aren't they saying about that about my product, and how can I get my product and software to be that way? And it goes back to what we said around, because it was solving a major pain point for them and then giving them that feel good factor as well as a nice experience, they felt that way about it. And but it's a great thing, and I say to a lot of businesses that I engage with now, who are your raving fans for your software? Who do these people are? How do they tell people about what you do, and do they go proactively out of their way and tell people? Because if they don't, and if you haven't got many raving fans like that, you need to focus on how you can get them, because they make a big impact.
So do you think that those were the two things? It was really focusing and understanding where the pain points were for your customer, but I think that relates to the second point that you made, which was about focus, is that you were looking at different markets, and in order to really understand your customer, you can't be all things to all men. You've got to go deep in a sector, and one of the things that I say to my clients is you have to understand their problems, your clients' problems, better than they do.
Yes.
You need to get there first. You need to cut them off at the path and stop them going down that path that is going to be a dead end, that is going to cause them problems. And you need to be able to articulate why that is a problem, and you need to show them a better path.
You're so right, you do, and it's, because customer insight. I always used to say to customers with our software, 50% of it was perspiration and 50% of it was inspiration. So 50% of it was perspiration from listening to them and looking at what they did and how we could do things, but also 50% came from our own ideas. And because I always believe that Henry Ford quote, if I asked my customers what they wanted, they would have told me a faster horse. So the reality is,
that's a great one.
The reality is, in software, you've got to be, and the best software developers and software people, and I've got had some good ones that worked with In Touch, would literally look at something and say, okay, I can see what you want to do here, but how about if I did it this way? Would that be good? And the benefit of having a developer's mindset on software, compared to, if you're like a person like myself or a customer, is people would go, oh, is that even possible? And the developer would go, yeah, of course, yeah, well, I can do this and this, and before you know it, and you're right, it makes a big difference to be able to have that that ability to really go deep and focus on what their issues are and what's going to make those customers, like I say, your platform, your software, what you do integral to how they operate as a business. Because the moment you make what you do integral to them, and actually something that they could change, but that change involves a real upheaval and a real, quite a lot of work. Actually, you're in the best position possible, especially as a software as a service business, which is all about recurring revenue, and building that revenue up on a monthly basis, because you're literally in a position where you can get up to the start of every month, and providing your customer service is good, and I believe customer service and customer success is vital and essential. Providing that's good and your product is embedded and really working well, it's a numbers game. Then it really is a case of how more can you bring on board to actually grow and develop your business and grow revenue. So I think that that deep understanding, like you say, is key. And I think you get that by, and I remember looking at the early days when we had In Touch, and we would literally look at a couple of industries. And we even did at the time, we actually created a product called In Touch with Members, where we were working with organisation that we worked with a large organisation that had a membership, had about 100 organisations. They were the governing body or the independent body for around 100 separate membership organisations. And if you think about it, the way you interact with a member is different to the way you interact with a customer. Mm. So in the end, we were sort of, if you like, riding 2 or 3 different horses, because we were thinking that they all were potentially going to give us a chance to get past the finishing line, and the reality is we probably should have backed 1 or 2 of them. I'm not saying we didn't, but we should have backed that one if it had been membership back then, and we'd focused on being the best software platform for membership organisations. There are thousands of those across the world. The business would probably be in a different place, but we didn't, and that's something I've learned from and how I apply it to other people now.
I think there seems to be a fear of lack of business, and when you're a small organisation, you are chasing cash. Cash is king. Yes. Cash is the cash flow, and you need to. I think there is the tendency to say there's money to be had there. I know this chap; he's in another sector, but we could provide a solution, and here's one. And before you know it, you've got a solution that's not really a solution for anybody because you're trying to make it too generic.
You're totally right, and that's pretty much where I think we got to as part of where the growth elements of where we were was maybe slower than what I wanted, because someone again once told me, you chase 2 rabbits, you lose both of them.
Yes,
and the reality is you have to be able to focus, and it is seen as being. I talk to lots and lots of small businesses now who hate the idea of being able to focus on a market, who absolutely detest it. And I say to them, just because you focus on a market doesn't mean you can't sell to someone else. Doesn't mean someone else won't buy your product, but it just means your marketing, your whole content strategy, your whole engagement strategy just becomes much easier, because you actually are going engaging with people that for example, if I wanted to go and target a product at accountants, I know where there is an event for accountants. There are forums for accountants. There are groups on LinkedIn for accountants. The whole marketing approach becomes a lot easier when I go after one market rather than just going after 50, 60 different independent structure areas. And that's the bit that I think I tell people. It doesn't mean to say you can't sell to others, or that you don't, if the opportunity arises, you don't go in there, but it enables you to focus your attention, your marketing dollars, your sales efforts, your product development then focuses in on what's right for those customers and their issues. And I know for a fact now that if I'd have done that earlier, it would have had a much bigger impact on In Touch.
Because the other advantage also is that if you're very focused like that as an organisation, and you're providing and writing solutions for a very targeted and clearly defined market, you can move more quickly.
Yes.
As the market changes, because if you're focused on 4 or 5 markets and they're all starting to shift,
yeah,
what do you do?
That's right.
You've got to keep pace with that industry. But if you're focused in on one, and I think we're talking about companies that are looking to establish themselves, but there are organisations out there that actually are quite sizable, and they're still very, very focused. They don't broaden out, and they're able to keep moving very, very quickly, and that is one of the big benefits of the internet and globalisation.
It is, and the other thing that people forget about is that just by focusing on something initially doesn't mean to say that you can't then go out to others afterwards. So 2 or 3 examples. Infusionsoft has become a brilliant product for a lot of small businesses in the space now. They focused initially on a group of internet marketers. That was their initial focus. They worked with that group religiously to start off with. Now their whole approach is to go after any small business out there, because they built up a critical mass.
They created that strong foothold, didn't they? First of all, before expanding out, and that's the difference. I remember seeing Infusionsoft, and I think they were after even 1- and 2-man businesses, people who were selling information via the internet. That was their real focus. So niche.
It was, and I say to people, even Tony Robbins, Tony Robbins, the great Tony Robbins, who everyone goes to see his events now. He started off as someone, and I believe it was either alcohol or cigarettes, but someone that was helping people to quit those 2 things. So actually, he focused on a specific niche at the time, and then suddenly, 20 years later, has become one of the world's greatest inspirational speakers. But he focused on a niche to start off with, and then built from there. And I think that's the bit for me, is that it's that, like you say, it gives you a stronghold, it gives you a platform on which to then build and develop. And every business should always take time to look and see where their market's going and is there still potential in their market, because there are disruptors, that people that come into spaces on a regular basis.
Yes.
But you've got to be able to look at, like you say, what that market needs. And it doesn't always have to be a vertical. It can be a set of characteristics. I always believe in people, it's more difficult sometimes, but it can be a set of characteristics. So, if you really want to go after early adopters, then there may well be enough of those people there. But, as we know from our work with the guys at, Daniel Priestley and the guys, at Dent, I always think that the focus that he gives on the three, in your market, is there enough of them? Do you enjoy working with them, and are they prepared to pay for what you do is really good advice for people to take.
Yeah, 3 very good points. So what happened with InTouch? Because you were working at InTouch, you made a number of initial mistakes, but then that evolved, and then you got into coaching. So how did you go on that journey?
So the long story short, it's actually still growing. It's still a great business. It's got thousands of customers, and it's still a good business. It's now focusing more on a certain type of niche in terms of sort of lead nurture and automation for training and development companies. So It's actually got a focused niche now in place. And the guys there are doing. I still own a large proportion of that business. But the long and short of it is, I did the program where we met, as you know, and I got to the point. Probably, as you get to a bit older, you start to think, what is it I really enjoy doing? And what do I really want to spend my time doing? And when if I go back to the story when I started, when I was engaging with these small companies, these, people selling products and services, my passion was really helping them get results. I love to see them get success, because to me, I think when you see people get real success and they achieve goals, and they, nothing beats to me seeing people that have made their own success of things. I think it's the best for, and especially if you can help them do that. And I guess I just felt, I'd launched something called the InTouch Growth Academy, where I'd sort of decided to combine some services and some support and some help alongside our software. Because going back to my point, software on its own, in most cases, without the implementation and the support and the education and disciplines, doesn't do anything. Yeah. It's got to be deployed in the right way. So I'd launched this Growth Academy, and people had come to me and said, I really like the way you help me do this and what you do. And it just made me think, actually, what do I really want to enjoy doing? Do I enjoy sitting in, with development to discuss development plans for software, and having to look at, business structural things like that involved in running a software company with thousands of customers? Or was I really, really passionate about sharing my expertise and knowledge as someone that's been in sales for 20 years and marketing? I've been in both sort of areas for a long time. Yes. With a select group of people that I can then really, really help them get some great results. And I just decided that actually that was what my real passion was. So I said, look, I'm going to make a brave decision. I said to the guys at InTouch, look, I have got some very good people there. So I've got some good people that run the business for me. And I said to them, we're going to make a change here. I think some fresh pairs. I've been doing it for 13 years as well, so I think fresh eyes are always good. They bring insights and different ways to look at things. And I just said that I felt that was the right thing for me to do, to do what I was passionate about, and to give others the chance to get involved. And also, I would be able to say, that we took some investment. I raised, nearly 400k of private investment in InTouch in September 13. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't hit the results that I said I would do. And I guess my shareholders probably felt that a change wasn't a bad idea as well. So I'm open enough to say that I think it was the right move all round for me to move into a mentoring role, which is what and support role, which is a company, which is what I set up. I set up a new business, and I've been doing that now for nearly 12 months, and I have to say I love every minute of it.
Excellent, and I think that's a very mature decision to make. I come across a lot of business owners, and they seem to be so linked to that business, it becomes part of their life, and they don't know when to let go. And that's one of the things that we're always coaching our clients about is having that exit strategy in place right from the day one when you open the door, and to know when there could be a number of reasons. I think sometimes you just need a fresh challenge. You want something fresh to get your head into, to really stretch you. You don't necessarily want to be repeating things. I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs, they like taking ideas and bringing them to fruition. They don't necessarily like as much when it comes to sort of more the management role, when you're getting larger and larger teams and you become the person who's just sort of making sure you're keeping all the employees working effectively. That's not necessarily them. And I think to walk away, although you haven't walked away completely, but to go away and do something completely new like that, it's a brave step.
It is. My wife said to me, "Are you mad?" And she was sort of, and not, she was sort of saying again, probably thinking, because obviously I didn't feel it was fair to say to the guys, well, I still want to be paid my salary while you go and bring other people in. So I had to sort of accept that we did a transition over a period of time, but that would change, and my revenue and my income would change from in a different way. But I felt it was the right thing to do, and I always used to. One of the things there's going back to this point about learning. I always used to say to myself, and I used to wake up every day, am I the best person to run this? And especially when I took investment, I was very conscious that there were people's money put into this business. And I was, whilst I made lots of mistakes and things that I would have changed differently, I was always very conscious that I had a responsibility for that. And if I felt that at any stage that someone was better placed than me to do something, then they needed to be, then I needed to say that. And there's a great book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. And he talks a lot about actually how, when you're in business, you're good at doing certain things at certain times, but at certain times it needs other skills and other involvement. And the key thing is to be able to see that and bring that resource in that can help you get to that point. But it also comes back to what I said at the start, and that's having a mindset to be challenged. So are you prepared to be able to look at something and go, actually, I think I might have got that wrong, actually, and do you know what, I'm going to be open to changing that or seeing something different? Or are you so blinkered that you can't change what you've done because you're entrenched in a position? And I guess I believe the best successful businesses will look at it and always have that mindset open to be able to see if there's something they can do differently and improve. And I guess that's how I felt, and I felt that the business could improve as well. And in result, the guys have gone on and having a good year. They will continue to go from strength to strength, and I'm pleased and proud of that. I've played a big part in that role, but my future now is about taking my knowledge and experience and helping other businesses achieve the results they want from that.
That's fantastic to hear that, and I'm sure that you are a much stronger person because of that experience, and it gives you confidence as well, because you've been able to step outside your zone of comfort and start something again and start to create value. And I think that's great. And now you've been involved in creating the Sales Genius book. Tell us a little bit about that. That sounds quite interesting.
Yeah, it's been great. So obviously the Sales Genius book came about because Andrew Priestley contacted me and a few other people around, sort of saying, look, I want to put this book together that shares 20 sales experts and people that have been there and done it, should we say, and put that together in a book that's that we can then help sell to and let's say take out to other businesses. And of course, I was asked to write a chapter for the book, and I was like, well, what do you write about? And I thought, well, okay, there's some things here I think are crucial in getting sales success, and things that I used to teach my clients now, but I help them with, and also that I used to engage with the clients that we use in our software before around structure and processes and systems. And we put together the book, and it's been amazing. I mean, I have to say the response has been great. It went to an Amazon bestseller on Kindle within a week, and I think it's now number 4. It went to number 2, I think it did, on the paperback version. Oh. And so I've got a copy of any, and again, maybe there's a little offer to anyone on the podcast. If anyone would, maybe I've got 5 copies of the book. If the first 5 people that maybe reach out to you, Mark, I'd be happy to send 5 copies of the book to give them so that they can have a look at it themselves and for free.
Certainly. Love to do it. I mean,
podcast.
No, certainly, I'd love to do that, and I think it's a great idea for a book. It's really good to get different people's perspective on sales. I mean, we talk about sales all the time on Boss It, and Michael obviously is an expert in the software sales, but it's really good to get other people's perspectives, because the way that we phrase things, the way that we explain things, can just spark off that idea or an understanding from one of the listeners, and you do need to expose yourself to different ways of understanding a particular topic, and you all bring different things to it. And I think the idea of all those different people contributing to the book. Who's the book published by?
I'm not the exact publisher. I think it's Andrew. So if you search it's on Amazon under Sales Genius #1.
As you're talking, I will do a search now actually, and I'll probably be able to find it.
I need to check exact publisher. Apologies, I don't know. I got the bits I got told to do. Because Andrew sort of collated it together and put it together as a book, as an offering. So I basically did my part. I think it's a publisher that he either has himself or works with. Because
I know he's published a number of books.
Yes.
Yes, I'm getting it. Sales Genius #1. 20 top salespeople share their best secrets. Now, we will put a link to this book when we put up the notes to this podcast. And as James has kindly suggested, the first 5 people that respond, we'll give them a copy of the book, which would be great. Well, the first 4 people, actually, because the first one I'm going to take.
That's absolutely fine. And I think the whole goal behind the book, and funny enough, I did an interview. I'm doing a few interviews. Some of the co-authors. There's some great people. A guy called Glenn Williamson, who spent 20 years in sales. Alison Edgar. You've got Michael Clark, who's done LinkedIn sales. You've got the guys like the Mobros. The guys that have set up their business in Leicester, who are now sort of the face of the UK export market for the UK in terms of their beard creams and beard accessories and stuff for the guys with beards. So there's great insights. Jackie Jarvis is another one. There's great insights from lots of people that have had a mixture of different sales careers as to what works and what gets results. And like you say, you don't often get a chance to contribute to a book like this where 19 other people are sharing their thoughts and ideas. And I've read it. I think it's a really good read. It's a really interesting read as well. Lots of insights and useful nuggets to gain from it.
That's brilliant. So what's next for James White?
So to be honest with you, I'm continuing on my learning journey. I continue to learn myself, but I've sort of set up a website. So I've got obviously www.jameswhite.business. I've got a YouTube channel where I share content on a weekly basis. I'm working with so I've sort of got a smaller group of clients that I'm working with now, a limit of probably sort of 15 clients that I'm working with at the moment on a regular basis. And I'm working with those guys now, and I'm loving the work that I do with them. I've got a select group of people that I work with on a mentoring basis monthly to help them get the results they want. We sort of set some parameters and goals and targets for what they want to achieve, and we then work to make this happen. And I was with a client yesterday who've literally earned themselves an additional 48,000 over the last 3 months as a result of working with me, who basically have changed the way they do things and won more business than they've ever won before. So that bit to me is the best bit of the lot, Mark, if I'm honest. Seeing people like the guy I was with, Andrew and Ian yesterday at Green Hat, seeing those guys win business as a result of the advice I've given them is the best feeling of the lot. And I'm with another client tomorrow doing exactly that same thing. To me, that's what I'm enjoying. I'm enjoying seeing my clients get results as a result of using my advice and experience. But also them, they're the people doing it. As I say to them, I might help with them with the composing, but they play the music. So.
That's brilliant. Well, it's great to hear that you've got so much passion and you're enjoying what you're doing. It's also nice because I didn't mention this, but actually you invited me onto a podcast that you were doing a number of years ago. And I really enjoyed that, talking about some mergers and acquisition aspects. So it's nice to be able to return the favour to you.
It's great to be here, and I know that I guess there's a lot of the guys that are listening, or the people, the teams that are listening to this, that are going through similar things that I went through. Where running a software business, growing that business and getting it to where it is. So hopefully, this will be really useful for them, and I hopefully get a chance to meet them at some of your events and activities in the future. And if I can help them in any way, they can always reach out to me via yourself or other things. I'd love to help them, get the results they want as well.
No, certainly. Well, we'll get you along to one of our upcoming events, and it'll be great to have you there. Thank you very much for your time today, James. It's been really good to have a chat with you. We've actually gone over the time, but that's fine because it's an informal chat. So we say 30 minutes, but we've gone way over on this one. But that's a good sign that we had plenty to talk about, and I'm sure that we could have gone on a lot longer. So thank you very much for your time today. This has been the Boss It podcast. As always, really interested in getting your feedback. We'll have notes to this particular podcast that should be appearing below this particular recording. And as James said, there's some copies of his book available to you. So first come, first served. Thank you very much. And we'll be speaking to you again soon. Thanks, James.